Heya, it's me, Jen, your host of The Whole Shebang. If you're watching this episode right now on YouTube, you get to see this face right now because the rest of the episode does not have a video with it. I made a cardinal mistake early on. I thought I didn't need all of the video files and I needed storage space more. I was wrong. And they're forever gone. But I also want to include the audio. So this particular episode is audio only. I hope you enjoy. Keep watching. Go ahead and look at the rest of them and you'll see plenty of videos there. In the meantime, you know what they say. You know what I say. We say, have a banging day.
A skill that will definitely lead to better sex. Getting embodied is, attuned to yourself, attuned to your partner. Sex is really all about sensing into your body and then taking a sip of the other person's body and then sensing into your body again and then taking a sip of the other person's body. You're like really attuning to your body and attuning to your partner's body in this loop.
Welcome to The Whole Shebang. I'm Jen Briggs, your host. Let me tell you what you're in for here. Many of us have been running at breakneck speed, functioning mostly in our heads, and we've suffered from disconnection, burnout, and lost passions. I believe it's because we functioned in part and not in whole. So we're exploring a new path, embracing intuition, creativity, playfulness, and connection in all of life. It's vibrant, powerful, and magnetic. So come on with me and buckle up, buttercups. We're diving in. Before I give you the whole song and dance intro, I just want to start this episode by saying very transparently that I am out of my comfort zone. Although I will say that it's getting more comfortable to talk about things like intimacy and sex in a little bit of a public platform. But it wasn't even until the last handful of years that I would talk about this with anybody, even privately, because I just didn't grow up having that conversation. And I think many of us are in that boat. And part of the reason that I started this podcast was because I was seeing so many of us that had taken these parts of ourselves and pushed them into shadows out of shame, which for sure there is a lot of shame surrounding sex, whether it's body image or different desires that we have that we don't know if they're okay to have, amongst other things that we talk about in this episode. But because we've pushed parts of ourselves like creativity, intuition, empathy, sensuality into the shadows, we have not functioned as whole and healthy beings. I just actually read a quote by Adam Grant. It says that guilt and shame are moral emotions. They exist to stop us from damaging our relationships and reputations. Our common mistake is letting these emotions creep in when we've done nothing wrong. If you haven't hurt others or violated important values, you don't need to feel bad. So when it comes to sex, a lot of us are embarrassed. Some of you are probably super uncomfortable that I'm posting this online. But a lot of us feel embarrassed because we feel shame or guilt. But to pause and ask ourselves the question, have you hurt others or have you violated important values? And if the answer is no, then there's no need for shame or guilt. And so ultimately, my hope with this podcast is to pull in all of these parts that we've judged of ourselves so that we become more whole beings, hence the whole shebang. And so today we bring on sex coach Sarah Beron, who I met at a fun game night at my house that was aimed around just building a sense of community. Needless to say, we got chatting and I was like, okay, will you come on my podcast? I'm scared and excited. And here we are. Scared not because of who she is, but because I know that it's a thing for me to do this. So quick reminder that this whole month we've been focusing on this series around love and relationships and, of course, sex. If you haven't checked it out, check out the first episode with Kaylin Rosenberg. She is a love architect and elite matchmaker. We dive into all things soulmates and relationships and how to heal them. The second week was with Max Trombley. We were focused on conscious dating, epic sex, and intimacy within a relationship. And today we bring on Sarah Beron. She is a sex and relationship coach. She's also a log rolling instructor and high school math teacher. As a sex and relationship coach, she helps men and women deepen intimacy and connection, reclaim desire, increase access to pleasure, and improve their sex lives. When she's not grading algebra tests, holding logs, or de-shamifying kinks, you'll find her in her garden, the sauna, and swimming in a frozen lake, or in the car driving too far for a deal on a mid-century modern vintage chair. She also enjoys thrifting, home improvement projects, and spending time with her husband of 14 years, 2 preteen daughters, and a white lab puppy named Oak. We cover a lot of ground in this episode, how we tend to silence our bodies, but the importance of tuning back in, getting grounded so that we can increase satisfaction in sex, how good sex comes from an energy circuit in the relationship. Actually, we dive also into the downside of being generous in bed. We talk about how women can experience more pleasure, how men can last longer. We dive into what a core desire with intimacy really is, how to find out what that is, and how to really turn that on. We talk about de-shamifying, whether it's body shame or desires that we have in the bedroom, how to repair resentment. We even dive into how to connect and talk with our children about sex and teach them what it means to have agency in their bodies and how to tune into that. So I have taken plenty of time on the front end. I hope the pump is primed. It's time to dive in, guys. I hope you enjoy. Sarah Beron.
Yes.
I'm so thankful you're here today. Welcome to the whole shebang.
Thanks, Jen. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Yeah. Before we hit record, I'll share with the listeners that so we're going to talk about sex today.
My favorite topic.
I think it's a really fun and important topic to talk about. And, you know, you and I were just talking before we hit record about how it's not easy to talk about, which is why I think it's so great that we are today. Mm-hmm. So thank you for being willing to hop on here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. We'll speak about pleasure too.
Yes.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind, just like introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I am 41 years old. I'm a mom. I've got 2 daughters, ages 11 and 10. I've been married for 13 years. I've been a high school math teacher for 20 years. And after 20 years of teaching math, I had to take a break and try something new and dive into a passion of mine. Yeah, I own a log rolling business.
Wait,
and a sex coaching business.
Oh. Hold on, I didn't know that. Okay, so wait, can we just pause and just like, what is log rolling? Because I'm imagining it's in water and you're walking on it. Is that what you're doing? You're like rolling the log with your feet.
Exactly. Yeah, you're trying to stay on top of a rolling log, which is freely floating in water.
What kind of water do you have in your backyard?
I just have a little lake. It's a very small lake. Yeah.
I was imagining like a city pool.
You can do it. I bring logs to people's backyards. Oh. Yeah, for like family reunions or birthday parties or things like that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this. Okay, so log rolling business and sex coaching
business. So this is my latest. It's been a long time coming. This has been something that, I've always been interested in doing. Even as a kid, I remember asking my friends, like, how can I be a better friend? And I craved like a lot of maybe specifically even negative feedback from people. Like, how can I be better? There's got to be some things that I can be doing better. And so as an adult, I just kind of noticed that I was just fascinated, I guess, with why some relationships, lasted and others ended, and how like this idea of being quote unquote good in bed, like what did that actually mean?
I know just a little bit about, you referenced this, that you started to get fascinated with like what was leading to dynamic relationships and what was not, whether they're people in your world or just hearing of people that maybe their relationships were ending solely or because of a lack of intimacy, or did you just start seeing patterns like that and you were like, okay, this is a thing I want to dive into?
Yeah. So as age, I'm 41 years old, and I start kind of watching my friends' relationships, and I noticed that a lot of people, after they have kids, struggle to kind of reclaim that sexual relationship or that sexual energy that they had in their 20s maybe, or pre-kids. And I started to get curious about like what is it that is blocking these couples who obviously love each other and they both want this? What is standing in their way? And it was really sad. It was really motivating to, want to solve this problem, want to answer this question, because I watched a lot of friends go through really painful divorces and really struggle and suffer. And so I was like, there's got to be something that we can do to help people, before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
And I think also I noticed at that time that there really wasn't a lot of helpful information out there that people are talking about. We talk about skills like finance skills, handyman skills, like all these things that you need as adults to, get through life in a healthy way. And we don't talk about relational skills or sex skills. And those two things are so important. Kind of relatedly, as, I aged and, had kids, like life gets tough. You've got high stress career, you're raising these two children up into, you're hoping that they're going to be productive adults. It's not easy as an adult. There's a lot of really difficult, stressful things that you have to do. And I found that I was so reliant on a really good sex life. Like I had problems with my boss at work and, problems with coworkers, problems with, friends and, parents dying and stressors around parenting, that I just was so thankful that at night I could go home and turn to my spouse and just get re-energized, get, relaxed, relieve some stress, like whatever needed to be done, I could get that through sex. And I really relied on that connection. I relied on this foundation, and it really like buoyed me and helped me through these difficult times in life, in adult life. And I recognized that a lot of my friends didn't have that.
I was just going to say, lucky you.
I know.
Lucky you.
It took a lot of work to get there. I mean, this is not something that just happened for me. I really worked at it, but yeah, this is kind of one of my goals is like, you don't have to wait for the perfect time to have sex. You don't have to be on vacation, like in a very stress-free environment or feeling quite energized. Like you can be tired, you can be stressed, you can be, grieving the loss of a family member, like the death of something or somebody, or and still turn to somebody and get help with that, get help processing all of these emotions and all these ups and downs of life.
So good. I'm taking notes as you're writing. Like, let me take a note on that. I can be tired. I can be. I think that's really important. I mean, I've had some really beautiful, intimate experiences in some of the most challenging times in my life because I think there's an ability to be more open and more vulnerable, or you just can't help but be that, and how that translates
exactly
to sex. It can be, in my experience, really powerful and beautiful.
Right. Like showing up as your full self with all of your full emotions, whatever they may be at that time, is so sexy. Like when you can stand next to somebody and be fully open and like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like that's really lovely and hot. And you can really feel that connection if you can do that.
So you said earlier that you found that parents, after they have the kids, were having a harder time kind of coming back to it. Do you think it was just like the drain, the lack of sleep, the tiredness? Like what was getting in the way of them finding their way back to that sexiness?
Really good question. I think I have a couple different answers. Like biologically, in your 20s, your body is just saying, make babies, procreate, right? Yeah. And so it really doesn't matter, how connected you, like how skilled you are, I guess. Sex is just great, or it's just fine. Like, you think it's great sex, right? In your 20s. And it's easy, I guess I should say. And then, you mature and you get to be a more dynamic person. And so your needs change. They become more specific, more sophisticated, and the potential to have really great sex is greatly increased. You need something different. You need something more specific. So if you're going to, as a 40-year-old, just try to have the same sex you had in your 20s, it's just not going to have the same result. And so, as you age, it's really important to try to like get as in touch with exactly who you are and exactly what you want. Get really specific, dive into your body, listen to your body more. A lot of women kind of get into a habit of like maybe enduring or not listening to their bodies. And
what do you mean by enduring?
Not getting exactly what they want out of sex.
And so they just put up with it? So when you say endure, you mean just like we're just kind of putting up with not getting what I want?
Yeah. Not really listening to their bodies because we're not taught to listen to our bodies all day, every day. You know, it's most productive to shut down your body's feelings. Get into a nervous system state where you're producing, you're not feeling, you're looking for the next thing, you're always going. This is what society is encouraging us to do. And also just really feed, you know, we're rewarded by all of our things that we get out of our brain, like all the things that our head does. Mm-hmm. And we're not as rewarded to sink into our bodies.
How do we sink into our bodies?
So that is a muscle that is weak until you continually try to
and
like
then
flex
you're
it.
Just in your body.
Yeah, the goal, I think, for people who want to increase their satisfaction in sex is to work on practicing switching their nervous system from this productive no feeling mode into embodied feeling mode.
I'm going to just pause for a second. Is this the same for male and female?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So both, you see it in both genders that like if you want to have better sex, you need to get out of production. And if I'm thinking of the typical male side of it, you know way better than I do, but that he would be looking at performance mode in the bedroom.
100%.
Okay. And so for him to have better sex and probably to quote unquote perform better, he also needs to get out of productive mode. Yes?
100%. So good sex comes from this energy circuit that happens when both parties are letting the pleasure sink into their bodies and like really like feeling that pleasure, letting it sink into their bodies, and then taking that energy and turning it into desire. And then, you know, kind of like breathing that energy out into their partner. And then their partner can take that in, let it sink in, and then bring that back energy. It's the circuit. And if one or both partners are not able to take that pleasure in because they're in their minds, they're in their heads, it just cuts off that circuit. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of like you are having sex with somebody and, you know, it's just like it's just kind of like there's not really that like
give and take.
There's like, or maybe they're, you know, focused on your pleasure and your pleasure alone. And you kind of feel, I have a client right now who he's such a good guy. Oh, he's like you know, just a gem, just a great, great guy. And he's so generous in bed and like respectful. And he just wants his partner to have so much pleasure that what has happened is he is just so focused on her. It's like, he's kind of just watching her and like, you know, doing things to her and like watching her and just is like, how about this? Does this feel good? How about this? How about this? And she's, you know,
I want you to be here with me.
Yes. The effect. And this has been going on for so many years for them. The effect on her is that she feels watched, you know, she feels pressure to respond. And there's no circuit. And so what he really is working on doing is sinking into his body, touching to receive, touching for pleasure. And then once he can like really, you know, receive in that pleasure and then that desire can be showered on his partner, she'll feel that desire. And that is what is going to turn her on. And we're told all the time, be generous in bed, you know, make sure she comes first, which is, you know, I think
it's all great.
But you also have to like really breathe in, you know, like relax into receiving. And otherwise that circuit is just going to get cut off and your partner will feel that.
I'm thinking about the classic scenario of, I feel like we hear a lot about this, or maybe it's portrayed in sitcoms or whatever, that there's the woman that just is not into it. She's, for whatever reason, maybe she isn't feeling pleasure, or maybe she's exhausted because she has kids, or, and I'm stereotyping here, and we're talking about heteronormative situation right now, but I was talking to one of my guy friends not too long ago, and he was like, yeah, I've been in situations where I'm with a woman that I can just tell, or in a previous relationship, like they're just kind of not into it, you know? And for a man that is like, I want to feel this circuit and I want to bring you pleasure, that it's like, it feels pretty icky.
Yeah.
Like it feels almost like I'm just like masturbating with their body or taking advantage. Like it feels really gross for a man that's not, they're not like, I just want to come. Like they actually care.
Yeah.
So what would you say to a couple like that? Whatever the role is, where one partner is like, I'm not feeling it, and the other one is like, this feels icky.
Right. This is so common, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are definitely like a couple things. I mean, there are people that are not as interested in sex, and that is just who they are. And so I guess the first question, you know, I would have is, you know, does she want to experience more pleasure? You know, is she just think, hey, I can't, I want to, but I can't? You know, that would be my first question. And then the second question is, you know, hey, let's take some time and dive into what it is that you want. I think a lot of women especially, but maybe men too. A lot of people haven't taken the time to find what I call their core desire. Most people have a core desire. This is what they want to feel to be the most turned on during sex. This is what motivates you to have sex. This is why you do this weird thing naked with somebody else, you know, when there are plenty of other things you could be doing, right?
Yeah.
So what do you really want to feel during sex? And this, as many people as there are in the world, there are as many answers to this question. And the interesting thing about this question is you have no control over it. This is something stemming from childhood.
I am fascinated right now.
Yeah.
I need some examples. Like, what is this? Core desire?
Well, this is a core desire that usually stems from an unmet need in childhood that you comforted yourself, maybe even non-sexually at first, by feeling this feeling. So for some people, like, let's just use an example, like, your mom, when you were growing up, ignored you. Okay. And so when that happened to you, you either, took comfort in being ignored. Like, this is your mom. This is, you expect this, or you imagined being lavished with attention. And so as an adult, what that does is that turns into your core desire. And either it can be like repetition with agency or repetition with authority, it's called it. And you will ask your partner, hey, I want you to ignore me when we're having sex. And that turns me on. Or you can repair.
So wait, okay, let me pause you.
Yeah.
So you discover the core desire.
Yes.
And let's say the core desire is to be ignored. You're saying that could be a real one.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because to me, it feels,
Exactly.
I'm quoting that as unhealthy in my mind. I'm like, oh,
I know this is so good. Great. I'm so glad you stopped me there. Because yes, this is 100% okay. Because even if it came from an unmet need and you're asking somebody to repeat that really kind of painful thing about your childhood, the difference is now that you are choosing it, and you're choosing it with consent, you're choosing it with agency, and you have absolutely no control over it. This is not something that you can therapize your way out of it. The only choice you have is either you can be ashamed of it and then not give yourself pleasure with it, or you can choose to embrace it, de-shamify it, know that you have no control, and go ahead and use it to your maximum pleasure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, where did I stop you? Because then you said you could either do that, and then the second part.
Some people choose that repetition with agency, and that is 100% wonderful. Great. Or what happens to you is the opposite effect is what turns you on the most. So you might decide or discover that if your partner lavishes you with attention and just pays extra careful attention to every single square inch of your body or all of your emotions, that's what turns you on the most. And it still comes from that same unmet need of being ignored, but it just had two different kind of pathways into pleasure.
So interesting. So how do you discover what your core desire, right?
Yeah.
How do you discover that?
Good question. Yeah. In my session, this is like a main thing that I do almost with every client. And we tap into, like, we practice at first, kind of getting embodied and tapping into the feelings that we have in our bodies. Yep. And we sink into that. So it takes a few sessions to like flex that muscle and really get good at like getting in touch, getting attuned to yourself. And then we run through, your greatest sexual experience, whether it's something that you've actually had, or maybe it's a fantasy, maybe it comes from a movie or a book, but usually people know, like have an idea of what specific experience would turn them on the most. It shows up, you can't like deny it. As soon as you give it permission to like come forth, it's there. And, the key is to, give yourself full 100% permission to feel however it is that you feel. And then, so we talk about this, like, I don't know, experience or fantasy that really turns you on. And then we really sink into the actual feeling that you had at that time. So what were the feelings? Yeah. Okay. This was happening, these actions or these words or this context or this place. But what were the actual feelings that you were having at that time? And then once we pinpoint the feeling, then we can build, I call it your hottest sexual movie. Ooh. You can build your hottest sexual movie from those feelings. Like, how can we really get you to feel that way the most fun way possible? And then we practice teaching your hottest sexual movie to your partners. So this is what I like. Can you do this?
Yeah. I was just going to ask, so then you have, what if you and your partner's two hottest sexual movies are not in alignment?
This will happen 100% of the time. I had actually one of my teachers of my program, she said that she had 500 partners and she found only one of them had her hottest sexual movie. Same core desire, same hottest sexual movie, basically. And they were just very compatible. So it's just almost 100% likely that you're not going to have a partner with your same hottest sexual movie. The great news is there that you kind of take turns. Like, you learn her hottest sexual movie and she learns yours. And then you kind of alternate. It's like, hey, you like dramas, I like comedies. We'll watch a comedy tonight and a drama tomorrow night. Is that okay? The good news is that, usually your partner's hottest sexual movie is really exciting and enjoyable to you, even if it's not
your hottest.
Yeah. And then sometimes too, if they're actually very incompatible, which sometimes happens, like, hey, her hottest sexual movie, I just cannot do that. That's okay too. What part of that can you do? What part of it can't you do? And then usually we can find a bridge. It does happen that like somebody's like, hey, I can just never, ever, ever do any of that. And they're like, well, this is really important to me. And then, it might be a good idea to open the relationship or find something, new.
I'm going to maybe get this wrong. You, right at the beginning, you talked about that there are things that can get in the way of our best intimacy. We're going to outtake that one. That there are things that can get in the way of our best intimacy and that there are things that support that. So what are the common things that you see that are like getting in people's way of the best?
Yeah, great question. There are definitely some things that can block intimacy, block desire, block arousal. Shame, any sort of shame, like, body image, it just cuts off that pathway to intimacy and arousal. And there are a lot of things that we can do about shame. We can totally, I'm a ruthless de-Shamifyer. Like, that it's amazing what you can do with shame and really like we can work with that.
Can you give me one example of like what you would do if somebody had body shame?
Yeah.
As an example.
So shame, Brene Brown, shame only lives in secrecy and silence. So really kind of the most powerful thing I can do to help somebody de-shame anything, even like body image, is just to hear them out and still love them and be with them, right? To say, I am still here with you, and think that, you're so worthy and you're so beautiful, and you can tell me all of the things that you're so ashamed about, and I'm still here. So the more we can speak the shame and witness people not moving away from us.
Yes.
But there are a lot of things we can do. We can celebrate with the person any, steps that they can take towards, de-shamifying themselves. We celebrate a lot in my practice. We can also shake our fists at society and we can definitely pinpoint like why we have the shame and it's somewhere outside of us. We can get mad, all of those things.
So shame.
Any sort of resentment built up in relationships, that can definitely block arousal and intimacy. So we practice repair in my practice with my clients, where it's a really specific conversation that you can have with a partner who has hurt you, and you have resentment built up, or really any sort of negative feelings. So it's a repair relationship that I'd love to teach anybody and everybody. Like, people should be doing this repair over and over and over again, constantly in relationships. And it's really the number one thing that I think we can improve upon in our society, is these repair relationships and repair conversations, I should say. Yeah, shame, resentment, and then any sort of lack of confidence. I have a client right now who, he and his partner went through a really difficult time, and the result was that he totally lost his confidence in the bedroom. And so now he's just having to like rebuild that.
Gaining the confidence
back up. And really that's mostly about just listening to your body. It's mostly about getting out of your head and thinking about, all the things.
Yes. To me, in so many of the conversations I'm having in every facet of life, it is becoming so apparent how important it is to get out of our heads and get into our bodies 100%. For so many reasons.
Our bodies are, really, I guess I just want to say, like, if you are only in your head and not listening to your body, then you're not showing up usually as your full self. And everybody around you can tell that. And the results are not as good. I think we were talking about this at your party, where like my first time I was challenged by my class that I was taking, like, okay, your homework is to sink into your body before you walk into the grocery store. And the first time I did that, I was in the parking lot and I did my exercise where I just like connected to my pussy basically, and like sunk into my body. And, I opened my eyes and I opened my car door and I walked into the grocery store, and 2 men came up and gave me, like, they rolled carts over to me and presented me with a cart.
I did not hear the story.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I walked through the whole grocery store, and I was just mostly like, paying attention to this experience, and people reacted differently. I actually had a woman come up to me and say, "Are you a therapist?"
What?
Out of the blue. I had not said anything to her. And I turned to her and I said, "Well, kind of, I'm a coach." And she's like, "I can tell you've got good energy."
Isn't that wild?
It was the most bizarre thing. And so I just think, like, if we could practice that on a more daily basis, show up for your kids in your body, show up for your spouse, for your partners, show up for your boss, show up for your clients as your full embodied, attuned self. Because if you're attuned to your body, then actually it's so much easier to be attuned to other people, because your bodies, your nervous systems are speaking to each other. And so if I can like tune into what my body is saying, my body knows what your body is saying. My body can Like our nervous systems.
We are
can
animals.
tell.
I like to just remember, like,
Exactly.
we are animals, and we can, right? Is that kind of what that is?
100%. Yeah.
When our nervous systems can sense each other. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so
we're
crazy.
speaking to each other. I can tell if you're like, if you're all like, I don't know, nervous over there, my body's going to get nervous. And then if I can attune to that, then I can be like, oh, okay, what's going on? Is there something that we need to be nervous about? Whereas if I'm just in my head, you're nervous over there and you can tell I have no idea you're nervous. Like I'm just like cut off from my body. Yeah.
Huh. I love this stuff. This is so wild. Okay. Let's talk about what's the phrase you used? Sex skills.
Oh yeah.
You said it's just one of the things we don't talk about. We talk about all kinds of other skills. So what are some... Let's dive into that.
Yeah. Sex is really all about like, sensing into your body and then taking a sip of the other person's body and then sensing into your body again and then taking a sip of the other person's body. You're like really attuning to your body and attuning to your partner's body in this loop. The kind of part of that too is like really sensing into what exactly you want in the bedroom, the skills of communicating that. In a really,
how do you communicate it in the moment? Yeah. Is it a conversation you have beforehand? Is it just like, Sarah, we need to come see you?
I think it's a whole setup of the relationship also. Yes. And I think it's before, I think it's during, I think it's all day long. I think it's, as you're doing the dishes together, I think there's like this, level of trust and intimacy, that you can build that really, allows you to have those sorts of like really intimate, conversations either, during sex or right before. I would say definitely right before, definitely during. And that's the tricky thing too, because you don't want to start explaining things until you are able to be really embodied and your partner is able to be really embodied.
Why is that? Or tell me more about that.
Yeah, because sometimes during sex, if you or your partner are just like in your heads, then like any sort of tip or trick or any sort of pointer. Yeah, exactly. Is just going to make the person more in their head, right? Yeah. Like you don't want to be actually thinking about, exactly the skills that you're trying to execute. You don't want to
angle this way, that way, do this, don't do that. Yeah.
Remember she said like not too firm or not too fast or whatever. Yeah. The goal is to stay embodied and be able to communicate at the same time. And that's a pretty difficult skill. Yeah. So I guess I would just start by just getting really embodied, communicate with your bodies, and maybe not so many pointers until you can get really good at that and feel really comfortable there.
I think I heard somebody say once, you can communicate a lot without words. Yeah. And so if you're embodied and you're responsive, and if 100%. Both partners are responsive, and if you're both attuned to each other's responses, whether it's a noise or it's something that's a cue that's like, yes, that feels good, or no, that's not quite right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And really those, like you said it exactly right. You are the most responsive when you yourself are embodied. If you can get embodied, then there's a lot that you can communicate without words. But to communicate a hottest sexual movie, and I really encourage my clients to be as specific as possible. You probably will need words for that.
Yeah.
But first, let's just focus on letting our bodies connect to each other, letting our bodies do the communicating, and really build that intimacy there and build that safe, free space that we all need to get the most aroused.
Yeah.
And your nervous system will quickly learn to be in that state.
Yeah.
If you can like really achieve that and kind of practice that, then, anytime you're like, getting ready to have sex, your nervous system will jump on into that state and be like, yeah, okay, I'm getting embodied. And then
maybe that's why it's easier, like, hearkening back to you saying like, you can be tired, you can be in grief.
Exactly.
If you can tap into being embodied more quickly and getting out of your head, I would imagine that it's less of a to-do to be like, okay, here we go again.
Exactly. I have a lot of clients that are like, oh, I have to work myself up to having sex like all day. I have to like pump myself up. Like, this is going to happen. I got to go, and really like, I think it's possible if you get embodied and like you get to this goal that sex can be as relaxing as watching TV. I have a lot of clients that are like busy after a really stressful day at work and they want to just go home and veg out. Like, let's totally veg out and relax and sink into each other's bodies and like let sex be really relaxing or reinvigorating and not full of effort.
How do you make that happen? I mean, that sounds lovely to me. I'm just thinking about, I've had experiences like that, but I'm thinking about people that are like, it just always feels like work until it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it all coming back to the embodiment piece?
I think, first of all, letting ourselves free of what we think sex is or how we have been taught sex is. Like, sex in movies, sex in books, maybe the sex that you had in your 20s, maybe that was like, very like energetic or like, a certain way. And I'd love to really just allow us to like expand the idea of what sex could be. Like maybe you come together with your partner and you just both like have just like, tired sex. It would have to just be like, just like really full of a lot of breath work and like exchanging a lot of energy, and just like really slow movements. Right.
Yeah.
And that can just be so relaxing and just kind of like meditating together almost. And like, you're not expending a lot of energy. And really like if your nervous system is in this really relaxed state, and used to being in that comfortable, relaxed state with this person, then I think that's possible. But another example is like my husband's dad died recently, and we had a lot of grief sex. Like we were just really in grief together. And this was like just a really good way to find connection and like, reach out to that other person, support that other person. And, like maybe you're crying the whole time, like whatever needs to be done, like just, instead of turning away from your partner or partners, like, let's see what happens if you turn toward your partner or partners and say, I'm tired. Let's see what happens. Like, I am grieving. I am stressed. Let's see what happens. Let's see what we can do with this emotion.
Yeah.
And like, let that be cool. Let that be really varied, let that be part of the way that you support each other.
Yeah, I love that.
In this life that is full of ebbs and flows. I'm frustrated. Like, let's have frustrated sex.
I love how you said, like, let's expand what we think about what sex can be, because I do think it can be really narrow.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful to talk about a couple of an anatomical. Is that the right
word? Yeah.
Things. So I'm thinking about like classic kind of bedroom problems, which may be like he can't keep an erection for long enough, or she's not orgasming, or other things that I don't know about that I'm not thinking about. Can you speak to some of those things?
Definitely. So the first thing, I ask a lot of questions like, have you ever been able to keep an erection? What are you thinking about when your erection goes away? Like, how much are you thinking about it before it goes away? Try to get, and then, take like a little brief history too. Like, when did this start happening? Or, because usually, or sometimes, it's because they're too much in their head. I mean, it's just, I guess I'm just coming back to that. Sometimes women who have difficulty orgasming, or men who have difficulty keeping erection, or, ejaculate before they want to, it's because they're not feeling into their bodies enough. Like men who ejaculate before they want to oftentimes are like, oh, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to feel. And then they're just not not aware of their arousal.
It seems like it's opposite of what you would think, right?
Yes.
Like you're like, if I focus on the feeling, then it's going to be not good.
Exactly.
But the opposite is true. You want to feel
your body. You want to feel, be in touch with your body. Women who have trouble orgasming maybe haven't found their core desire, maybe are not allowing themselves to sink into receiving, maybe are not allowing themselves to be specific enough with their partners, maybe aren't practicing being embodied and really getting like that full, sometimes I ask my clients, like, imagine that only your nerve endings exist and that is it. And you are focused on only what your nerve endings are experiencing right now.
Wow.
And I think it's like a good way to say, sink into every single feeling that you're having, every single sensation. And we don't practice that. I mean, I'm a teacher and we can never use the bathroom during the day, and so it's like, ignore the fact that you have to pee, just ignore it, or, you're sick and tired and you still have to go to work and perform at your highest ability. We're constantly like shutting off all of our feelings. And so it's a really alien thing to suddenly try to tap into that. Yeah. And then, there's a lot of pain there too. Like a lot of people have pain that still lives in their connective tissue, into their bodies. So it's a difficult thing to sink into their bodies and feel all of the feelings because there's a lot there. So it's just easier to stay in your head. And then when you do, I think, there's sometimes problems arise.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that there are never medical issues. There are definitely sometimes things that, a medical doctor should be informed about and encourage people to talk to their doctors about these things.
So if there's somebody listening today that is their sex life's not what they want or need it to be, and maybe the conversation hasn't been open at all with their partner, where do they start? Like, what do you say?
Yeah. So I always encourage people to ask permission to have an emotional conversation before diving right in, right? Find like timing, tone, so important to getting the results you want, right? So you go up to your partner and you say, is now a good time? I have been thinking about something. It's emotional. It's difficult. I'm wondering if you're available for that right now. Are you tired, stressed? All these things that are going to make you not react well. And if your partner is not available, say, okay, let's find a time where you are available because this is important to me. And then my number one piece of advice when you find time and your partner is listening, take a minute and be as vulnerable and talk about like only yourself as much as you can. And just like, it takes a lot of strength to do that. I'm going to get kind of emotional here because it's really hard, right? Mm-hmm. It's really hard to just bare yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Be just totally like emotionally naked, right? And open to anybody. It's scary. It's hard. We don't practice that. And so if you can do that, people respond well. Your partner will likely respond really well to that.
And to pinpoint that, you're saying, and where the emotion is coming up for you, is that when you go to somebody vulnerably open, focused on you and what your experience is or what you need or the shame or whatever it is that you're feeling, that they'll be responsive to that versus getting defensive, or versus if I come to the conversation with like, I'm really frustrated because you never want blah, 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 or you never did da, da, da. Of course, they're more likely to be defensive in that moment. So how do I show 100%. Up really open and really vulnerable? And so for you, I'm going to ask, this is kind of adjacent to the topic, but I'm curious, just because I'm curious, like, where's the emotion coming from for you? Is it what? Yeah.
Yeah. Since doing this work, I've just become really emotional. Anything that's like really difficult is like right there. And for me, this one is, I think, the power of being vulnerable. Like I have witnessed, what happens when somebody really digs deep and is able to be vulnerable. The different response they get from their partners versus typically, people get defensive because it's really difficult to be vulnerable. It's really hard to do that. Yeah.
And I think it's an idea we've all heard. We know that if we're going to go to a problem, own what you can own, don't point fingers. And that's not always easy to do, especially if we're wanting to protect ourselves because of whatever is happening. So I think that's a really big takeaway from this conversation, that people can just pause and take the time to be intentional with what is a really important conversation. What do you think we haven't talked about that people need or want to hear?
Go ahead and imagine whatever is coming up for you and give yourself free rein. Get specific, let yourself sink into what you want to feel. And then once you've defined those things and once you flush that out yourself, then communicate that to your partners and see if you can bring them along, get them on board. And I'm not saying that every single one of your fantasies you need to communicate. If you just love, you've got your handful of fantasies that you just are really happy to keep yourself, that's awesome. Like that's great too. But if there are some things that you might enjoy somebody saying or doing, give yourself permission to ask. It's exciting. People, I think, want to hear those things and want to know, usually.
I imagine that they would.
Wouldn't that be so fun to find out?
I would be like caught off guard, like, oh God, she's telling me her fantasies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's such a really loving thing that you can do, is like, let somebody really turn you on. Like, what a gift, right? They love you. They want to turn you on. Like, share what turns you on with your partner or partners.
I love the way you put that. What a gift to let somebody turn you on.
Yeah.
That's yummy.
And then that desire, will just be showered back on them, and that'll really turn them on. It's a good.
Do you find, it seems to me that once you get the fire going, that it's going.
Yeah. I think that is true. I think we do have to kind of keep in mind that people are still always learning about themselves. So there's always going to be, nothing's going to ever stay the same. So if you have this really hot sex life right now, awesome. But keep in mind, your partner and you are going to be developing and changing and finding out new things about yourself. And so keep that curiosity going, keep that open door going, keep that open conversation going, check in a lot, share a lot, But yeah, I think it's totally true that, if you can kind of get that fire going, then your nervous system feels really open and really ready and like embodied and comfortable and free and confident. And all of that just leads to more discoveries and more communication and greater sex.
That's so good. I love that principle of curiosity. Again, a basic one, but just in all of life as we are evolving with anybody, really, friends, partners, whomever, but taking that idea to one another that I know you're going to continue to evolve and I'm going to commit to be curious to your evolution and what that kind of commitment to ourselves and to one another looks like, I think is wildly powerful.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. Because it takes the judgment away. It takes the defensiveness away. It keeps that door open. Oh, yeah. Curiosity is great. Yeah. Let's keep that going.
My upbringing was very conservative, religious. So it wasn't until later years that I'm like, how would I even know where to get what to explore, like what to get creative with, because I just didn't have any framework.
Right. What are some ways that we can
Ooh.
Encourage our daughters and our sons to have curiosity and this idea of exploring and communicating about sex instead of this like virgin culture or body shaming or productive over feeling,
Okay,
idea.
let's pause here and talk about this. We're going to talk about this.
Okay.
I'm trying to, I've got 3 daughters, and in this conversation, even today, I want to protect kind of their privacy in this conversation, knowing that this is public. But I think it's really important that we think about how we're speaking to our children. And some of the input that I've gotten when I tell my friends like about the conversations I'm having with my kids, they're like, whoa, that's great. And some of them don't have kids. So they experienced what I experienced growing up, which is like, we didn't really talk about it. And I don't think that also has necessarily everything to do with my religious upbringing. I think that may be more of a generational thing, that it was like, we just don't really talk about sex. And there is an internet now. There's a lot of information out there, and they are absolutely going to find out about things and be shaped by either religion or what they're taught in school or what they see online or pornography, or there's a lot of different ways that our children can be shaped. So how do we have the conversation? What does it look like? What do you say to that? I mean, you've got kids.
Yeah.
What's important to you to convey to your children?
Yeah, I think, it changes as they age. Like, you can add things as they grow up, but from the very beginning, it includes conversations about what it is they feel, they like, they want, right? So, the classic, do I have to hug Uncle Paul? Like, no, like you can make a choice about how comfortable you feel and do what your body is telling you it wants to do. Also, paying attention to what feels good and what feels bad. Like, do you like it when I brush your hair like this? Simple questions like that as they're growing up, as like toddlers.
That is so great that you're connecting these things right now, because I don't know that a lot of us would be connecting that. We're asking them what feels good and what doesn't, and helping them understand what it means to have agency. Exactly.
And like being in touch with their bodies and what their bodies are feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
And taking that time to, instead of, brushing their hair and rushing out the door, like, okay, I'm brushing your hair right now. We're going to focus on what's happening at this moment and be in that moment. And then as they age, I love the idea of separating what society or what their friends are telling them versus how they feel. Like, anytime you can ask your kids, well, how do you feel about what so-and-so said? How do you feel about what so-and-so did? Like noticing that they are not what their friends are saying. They are not what their friends are doing. They are not what society is saying or what society is doing. They can make their own decisions. And then as they approach puberty, giving them full permission to do whatever they want to do, as long as it's what they want to do. And it's not, and they have to really think carefully about whether they're feeling pressure from their friends, whether they're feeling pressure from their boyfriends, whether they're feeling pressure from somebody else outside of them to do anything, or whether it's really coming from their bodies and what they want.
So I'm like the classic, I think, reservation on this. Correct me. I mean, this is just my perspective, is I'm afraid that they're going to get hurt. Is kind of, I think, a common. So my job as a parent is to protect them, and their brains aren't developed. Can they make those decisions for themselves? Where do I step in? And where do I not step in to set boundaries for them while they're underage, whatever that means?
Yeah. All of those things can be part of that conversation. Like, hey, your brain is not developed enough. Maybe you're not ready to make that decision. This is the research about brain development. Give them that information. And they will 100% get hurt no matter what.
Yep.
And getting hurt is hard. but it's not bad. It's really great. You know, we've all been like really hurt by relationships and made really bad decisions. And yeah, like it would have been easier and nicer and more fun if we hadn't. And we wouldn't have learned as much if we hadn't. Like life is, full of like good hurt. And as much as we don't want to watch our loved ones go through that, they will, and it's good. I know that was kind of harsh.
I can
cut that out if you want.
No, I think I agree with you. I think, like, just real talk, I'm thinking about STDs.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about pregnancy that isn't planned.
So definitely all the information about pregnancy, definitely all the information about STDs. You know, we want to make them afraid of getting pregnant before they're ready. Fear of God of pregnancy before they're ready. Get all of that information out there, all of that STD information, all of that brain development information, you know, pump them full of every piece of information that we can and still give them 100% permission to, once you know all of these things, what do you want to do? And whatever you want to do, given all of this information, as long as it's you who is making that decision, you have full and complete permission to do so.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's important to me is, it just really comes back to what you're saying, like what gets in the way of people's best sex life, best intimacy. The first one is shame. And I think whether it's body shame or shame about sensuality in general, or feeling dirty or self-judgment on different things, that I want them to know that it isn't dirty or bad.
Right. If they have this like inner flame, it's great. Like, I think that's great. I think like, go for it. Have fun there. Like, if that is really coming from your body, like, there's no reason not to do that in a safe environment, you know, with all of the information. Be smart here.
I know, we just, both you and I instantly were like, and then we light up with all of the buts, which are, but okay, which is really natural. It's like, okay, this feels natural. You have a desire. There is no shame. It is not dirty or bad. Go for it. And then there's all these buts lined up in my mind.
And those buts are great because we're having those conversations. Like, I think the number one thing, talk about it in de-shamifying ways.
Okay. Anything else on your heart or mind? We complete?
I think so.
Okay.
I think this was great. Can't think of anything else.
Okay, Sarah. So I will share your information in the show notes on where people can get a hold of you, so you're available to take new clients.
Perfect.
On.
Yes.
Thank you for... I just feel like I always want to tell people in the most genuine way possible, thank you for following your truth and your path. You know, you've been through iterations and you've seen a challenge in relationships. You've felt compelled towards things. It's not easy to take any leap in life, and particularly in a topic that is harder for a lot of people to talk about. So thank you for helping pave that way and for being here today in a public platform to have a conversation that isn't always easy to have.
Oh, that feels so good. It has been difficult. It was a difficult journey to follow. And I'm really excited to be starting it, and being surrounded by people like you really helps me. So thank you for doing your work too, and allowing me to be here today, and really challenging me and pushing me forward and encouraging me, encouraging all of us.
That's what this is about to me. I was saying to somebody the other day, like, one of the things I kind of knew in my head about this podcast, but I'm now starting to feel it and experience it, is that I'm like, oh, we're building community. Because if people are taking an hour to listen to a thing and they're taking the time to come have the conversation, we are like-minded enough. And now my next is like, how do I pull the community together? Like, what would it look like to get us all in the same room?
Sounds like a place I want to be, for sure.
Yeah. So it's been really fun. But I'm excited to see how this unfolds for you. And I won't be surprised when people continue to reach out to you and this flourishes the way that it's designed to.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited too. It's going to be fun.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope this episode is supporting you on your path to becoming the strongest, shiniest version of you. My goal and hope is to continue helping people through this podcast. So if you've enjoyed this episode or taken anything that's helped you out, the best thank you would be to join me in moving this forward by doing 2 simple things. If you haven't already, following the podcast is very helpful. Also, apparently the algorithms really like reviews. If you can take a minute to leave a review, artificial intelligence would love it, and I would be so grateful. Feel free, of course, to share an episode with someone who you think may need to hear what you heard today. Thanks again, everyone. I genuinely appreciate you, and I'm so thankful to be building a community like this together here. I'll catch you later. In the meantime, have a bangin' day.